slowly opening her eyes at first. The female Vivicaine jolted awake, and she began to look around. At least she tried. She had to wipe the goop off of her eyes more and more as it's still trying to keep her eyes closed. But even as she opened her eyes away from it, she could see that fluid was still on the glass in front of her, making it difficult to see. She wondered, was she safe? Were those her kin moving around? She couldn't see, nothing but blobs. Where is she? It doesn't seem like she's where she was. The bolts then release, and cool air enters the pod as it slowly opens at first. The cool air of the pod mixes with the fluid, and the girl felt the chill go up her body. Then she jumps up and begins to thrash as her mind fully comes back to her memories of the battle. A battle against the avian Jerusalem left her ship adrift and an easy target. She wondered, since the ship was powered down, engines at minimal, just enough to keep the pods running, just enough to keep them alive, but no weapons, no shielding, no nothing. Had the Rus actually come back? Were they going to make us slaves, servants, or perhaps a bargaining chip? But she worried most of all if she would suffer the complete indignity of being nothing but one of their toys. As she thrashes out at anything that comes near her, worried that she might be taken, she knows that she needs to fight for everything. This is a standard across all species. If you're about to be taken, you fight with everything you have. Fight for your life, because if they take you to a secondary location, they can do whatever they want. She continues to fight these, whatever they are, in full suits. She can hear them speaking her language through these strange boxes. These must be translators, she thinks. Oh no, it's not even our species. She fights even harder, and she kicks one hard in its exoskeletal torso. She can hear a slight crack as it drops to the back. Then she swipes hard, hitting the second one across the face, pushing it away. She then falls out of the pod, trying to jump out, but it seems like atrophy has been taken its toll, as she ends up on the floor. As she tries to get up, she tries to fight, and that is when a four-fingered wet hand suddenly grabs her arm and lifts her up. She screams, but realizes it's her ship's captain. He's still wet from stasis as well, but it seems with more of his wits intact than she does. She's absolutely shocked. She didn't expect to see him. She was shocked even more that a male is actually holding her by both arms, almost elevated up in the air, trying to get her to calm down. She was also completely shocked that he was completely devoid of clothing. She knew this was a requirement for the stasis field, but it was still something she was unaccustomed to, being so young. She was close, but not there yet that she would be ready for a bonding. She finally began to calm down. Finally took a breath. She looked over as the one she had swatted away went over to the one they kicked and slowly raised it up. She could once again hear the voices coming through, and as she listened close, she realized that doesn't sound like a translator. Still coming back to herself, she looks around, left and right, and the crew is being awakened all around her in different areas, but this was not the same area she was in. This was not her ship. She was confused. She looked around as wet bodies began to be aided out of the pod, some of them sliding out, many falling over as their own legs were not operating right. She realized, again, this is not the ship, but this is the crew. She was confused. Eventually, the captain lowered her and released his grip, and the female simply said, "How? Where? What?" That is when one of the technicians walking up says, "Well, that just leaves why and when, does it not?" The female turns to see another female Vivicaine. This one was clearly a medical technician. Clearly in the same clothes she knew, but they seemed to be slightly different. These were medical clothes to be sure, but It seems as though the style has changed. She thought to herself, how long were we asleep? That is when the technician reaches over, grabs some robes so that they can cover themselves. No towels to wipe themselves, as these clothes were designed specifically to soak up the fluid and pull it away from the body and then dry itself. The technician simply turns and says, "Follow me." They walk down the hallway, past each of these personnel coming out of their pods. They're all getting dressed, some of them looking embarrassed that they'd been seen without clothing, others just happy to be alive, others running over to their shipmates and giving them an embrace, some even attempting to mate right there, as though they were so elated to see their mate still alive. They had to be reminded that they're in the open, but one of them screamed how they cared not what others thought. They simply wanted to hold their mate one more time. Everyone understood this, as the battle was particularly difficult. The ship itself, they knew, could not be salvaged. In fact, the bow section had been completely removed. It was so bad that the forward third of the ship was completely impassable. No doors worked, and even if they did, nothing was pressurized, nothing was sealed, and they would risk the rest of the ship even trying to save it. Unfortunately, the bridge itself had been almost completely destroyed. By the time the bridge crew got out, they only had a few moments before there was rapid depressurization, as the whole place simply burst into space. In many cases, the consoles were ripped right out of their moorings. This left many confused. How are we still alive? They once again followed the technicians, everyone being gathered up and brought into another area, an area where they could cleanse themselves, dress in more appropriate clothing, and then meet inside a chamber where they would be briefed. Cleaning up, the female felt alive again, although she felt bad for striking one so hard she heard a crack, but she knows that the standard exoskeleton will heal fairly quickly. Yet, she was just a little upset that she was not about herself. Looking over, she could see the other females of her crew all enjoying the warm breeze, the warm water, the warm towels, the warm everything, as they had been in the coldness of space for so long. They finally were able to enter the chamber. Everyone was there. A few took some time cleansing themselves, of course. Others just wanted to take time to get a hold of their own wits. But eventually, everyone was there. And once everyone was accounted for, they were addressed. They were amazed. One of their own high council had actually come out. Many of them bowed immediately in respect for the position, but the high council member simply told them to raise themselves up. There was no need for formalities after everything they had gone through. Again, their crew was still confused, but they saw that the captain was right there next to the high council member. He had a strange look about him, a look of understanding, a look that they would all have fairly soon. The high council member addressed them all and congratulated them on returning. He stated how all of them were considered lost at one point, and the families would be very grateful that they returned. However, there was an issue. There was an issue that everyone would need to come to terms with. They had been in stasis for several decades, almost a full century by their own calendar, which is why technology had increased a bit. Fashion obviously had changed, and it seemed as though they had been losing the battle, losing the war for a long time against the Jeros. Yet it seemed that the Jeros had other issues all of a sudden, and they simply pulled back away from their lines, pulled off the front line, leaving an entire buffer area, and then simply calling for a ceasefire. No one understood what was going on. No one cared at that point, and it's still unknown why they would do this. However, one thing became constant. Everyone knew that when there was a battle, there was something was going to show up afterwards. A pest, a parasite perhaps, something to feed off of what was there. They called this parasite, this pest, this almost virus, human. A bunch of their vessels, strange, clunky, boxy things, would show up and strip the area clean of all ships. There was nothing left. There are no more debris fields. The humans simply just took them all. But what surprised them all was one simple fact. Even though the humans would show up, take all this equipment, all this data, all this technology, the one thing they never kept were survivors. They even brought back some of the bodies of those that had not survived, and they returned them. The female looked confused. She had not barely heard any rumors about these things called humans when her ship was taken. When her ship was destroyed, she had never seen one, not a sketch, not a description, nothing. She had heard the word once in passing, and that's all. But now she was listening with all of her ears perked up. She listened very closely as the High Council continued to speak and told them that a human had found their ship, had taken the ship, and they had torn it apart long before they had actually returned to their own home system. The Vivicaine system is very far from humanity. However, for some reason, humans are very, very fast. They were able to jump in the system in a way that most Vivicans can't figure out. Yet once they did, they immediately started transmitting a signal. They did not come in any type of aggressive stance. Instead, they needed some sort of freighter as they had many personnel and they were unsure about the health. And since the humans are unknown in their own biology, as they hide from the rest of the universe, this is why biosuits are used. They didn't want anybody catching some sort of human issue. That is why everyone was confused at first when they woke up. Why were their own people in full hazmat suits? This answered that question. Now they have an answer how they got back. But why would the humans do this? Was it out of spite? Out of a gesture of kindness? No one knew. All they knew is that once the humans took technology, you'd never see it again. The High Council member mentioned how they did have a short video of a human, a single human, as it seems as though the humans didn't want to be seen. They would attach to the ship via an umbilical, or they would dock inside your ship if they could, but then they would simply open their bays and allow others to come and get the pods out. They had one 4-second video. All they saw was some sort of bipedal machine moving about. The image, though very clear, was difficult, and they only caught one of the hands with 5 fingers, and it seemed as though this mechanical device had no face. The Vivican female was surprised, and she simply leaned over to one of the other crewmates. Why would a technological race, a technological species even, why would they care about biologicals? The crewman simply gave his version of a shrug, which was to wave his tail just a little bit. Everyone was confused, but they were grateful for one simple thing. The humans had actually saved them. And they were beyond grateful for this, because now they could do something that every warrior wants to do, and that is to go home. The High Council member was immediately told something at this point. Everyone was confused, and the council member was also confused and said they had a small video, a very short video, another 4 or 5 second video of a human, but they weren't sure if they could see much. This turned out to be a video from their own ship. Somehow it was captured and the data was stored in one of the pods. They brought it up with their full transparency out there. They saw an image of one of these metal bipeds. It was standing in front of the female Vivican's pod. It seemed to be staring at her. Then it reached up, and it seemed to put its 5 fingers out broad against the edge of the pod's glass and seemed to look at her. And then it simply pulled its hand away, turned, and walked. The Vivican female was a bit put back at this as they all started to look at her. She didn't know what was going on, and even the captain looked down at her and asked, "Is there anything you would like to say?" The Vivican female was completely put back and simply stated, "I'm not sure. Maybe they find me cute?" With this, everyone began to bust out laughing, and this thankfully broke the tension around the Vivican's social structure. They were able to hear rumors, tales of how humans would actually save one who was in trouble, one who was stuck in the pods. If you were still alive after the battle, the humans would make sure you would get home. They became a legend in space. A giant question mark, though. What were these things? And due to this giant question mark, the word human has multiple meanings. Literally, the most universal word. You have to decide what it means via the context. Yet to the Vivican, more often than not, human refers to savior, mystery, and angels. Little did they know, over with the Jaros, humans meant destroyer, conqueror, and
demons.
Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on this very off-the-cuff, minimal note story, and I sure hope you guys enjoyed it. Now, before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Julius Boone, with Alan Williams coming in a close second. And I also need to send out some great big thank yous to the supporters of this channel. You guys are fucking awesome. And they are Prozac and Pancakes, MTF Guard, Guardian Sage, Brian Kemp, Erica Gem, SS Demon, and Sir. Thank you all for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.